Hey, welcome. In this video, we will start building the sign-in page. Let's go. Before we begin, I just want to mention that we are going to use the React Suite UI library that we've installed. We are going to utilize it a lot, so please open this documentation on your next step so you always have access to it. So go to homepage, then click on components, and here on this page you can find all components that this library provides us with. It is very simple to use and they all are mostly intuitive. So let's say if we go to button component, from here on every component page you can find a lot of different examples and use cases, and also if you click on show the source you can find how this component can be used in your code. So you can always copy and paste it. And also if you only need to know what component receives as props, you can scroll down to the very bottom and you can find all possible props that can be passed down to this particular component. All right, so inside our code, when I will write this stuff, I will not reference it, maybe a few times, but most of the time, because it is very intuitive, I'm not going to explain it. So if you still don't know what is going to happen, please navigate to this documentation. All right, so let's get started. So let's navigate to our code and let's open sign-in page. And here we are going to start. First, we will remove this div and we will put container component from our suite. You might think that it is very similar to container from Bootstrap because it is container. However, in this library, it is not. It just gives us the display of flags. Then we're going to use grid. And in this library, grid is pretty much the same as in Bootstrap, but unlike in Bootstrap, it has 24 column system, unlike with Bootstrap with the 12 columns. All right, so inside grid we have row, and inside row we have column, just like that. So our column is going to be half of its max width on medium devices. So on very small devices, we are going to put all 24 columns. On medium and above, we are going to put 12. Now, inside this column, we are going to put panel component, and it basically will give us a few of padding. Okay, so inside we're going to put div, and inside this div we will define h2 tag that will say welcome to chat. Underneath we will put p tag that will say progressive chat platform for neophytes. Something like that. All right, let's check it out. If I refresh the page, I can see this strange weird background. That's because I imported column from our suite lib carousel. I don't want this. This is a little bit of tricky when you use auto IntelliSense. Make sure you import it from just our suite. If I save it now, I can see that it actually worked. However, our text is not centered. We want to make it centered. So we can use one of our utility classes that we put inside utility as CSS, and they are almost like Bootstrap. So we can define class name, text, center, and it will work. However, we can see that if we inspect it, our component is not completely centered on large devices. However, on mobile, it's okay. That's because when we apply this 12 column system, our element is not, let's say, centered. We need to apply offset. It is again very similar like in Bootstrap. So for 12 columns, we need to apply offset of 6 columns before it. So we're going to put md offset of 6 columns. And right now, our grid element will be centered, as you can see from this padding over here. All right, it looks good. Now, under this div, we're gonna put another div, and here we will define our buttons, sign in with Google and sign in with Facebook. So first I'm gonna put button. Then as props, I will pass, it is going to be a block button. It will take all width of its parent. Then I will put color and I will set it to blue, and that's it for now. So inside this button, I'm gonna put icon component from our suite, and as icon, I'm gonna specify icon prop for Facebook, just like that. And then I will put a simple text, continue with Facebook, but capitalized. And the same I will do for sign in with Google. I will specify a color green, and instead of Facebook icon, I'm gonna specify Google icon, and then continue with Google, just like that. Now let's take a look. Okay, it seems fine, but we want to add some margin. So for this div, let's put class name and margin top 3, something like that. Okay, looks good. Now we need to make it centered vertically, or maybe add some margin to the top element so it looks more nicer. So for this grid component, we are going to define class name, and we're gonna put margin top page. So this is class that I defined in one of the utility files, so it just gives a lot of margin to the element. So if we inspect it, as you can see, margin top gives us 150 pixels. All right, so it looks good. Now what about functionality? How we can actually manage our sign-in and finally start adding this Facebook and Google sign-ins. So what do we need to do? Inside Firebase.js, where we initialized our application, we need to import auth library from Firebase. So here we're gonna import Firebase auth, just like that. Then here under app, we're gonna export const, a new variable, which we'll name just auth, and we will call app.auth. And it will give us the auth object that we can use to interact with Firebase. So let's save it. Inside sign-in, we're gonna define our handlers for on-click event for buttons. So we're gonna put first on, let's say, Facebook, sign in. And then I will do the same for Google, on Google, sign in. And their functionality is almost the same, so I'm gonna create a third function that I will call inside on Facebook sign in and inside on Google sign in. So we will name it something like sign in with provider, and provider is either Facebook or Google. All right, so as an argument, it will receive this provider, and then we will do something inside. So inside on Facebook login, we are going to call sign in with provider, and we will pass a provider. We will talk about provider in a moment. And here also sign in with provider. Now, how we can actually sign in? So inside sign in with provider, we can just type auth and import it from our MISC Firebase file, this auth object that we got from here. If we just put dot, from IntelliSense, we can see a lot of things happening over here. We can access current user, we can confirm reset password, and different, if we just type sign in, we can have different things here. We can sign in with email and password, with phone number, with pop-up, with redirect. So a lot of things happening here. We are interested in sign in with pop-up. And if we call this method inside, we need to pass the provider, and it is going to be provider that we will receive as an argument. So we will put it here. So what is this provider? So this provider object, we need to import from, let's say, Firebase library, and it is static. So what we need to do here, we need to import Firebase from Firebase/app. Again, it is important to import from Firebase/app. So here, as a provider, we are going to pass new firebase.auth.facebook auth provider, and we need to call it. It will return us a new provider object that we will pass as an argument to this function. And the same we will do for Google sign-in. We're gonna put new Firebase auth, but this time Google auth provider, just like that. Now let's actually associate these handlers with the buttons. So for on click event, for Facebook button, we're gonna put on Facebook sign in, and for Google, we're gonna put on click on Google sign in, just like that. All right, looks good. Now this sign in with pop-up, if we hover, it is a promise, so we need to await it. Let's convert our sign in with provider to an async function and await this sign in with pop-up. And then let's put the result into result variable, and let's console log and see what do we receive. So if I refresh the page, I open console, then I can see that responded with 400. Okay, that's fine. Let's click on continue with Google, for example. All right, you can see that it actually doing something, and right now I can select one of my Google accounts. All right, let's select one of my accounts, and now you can see that I have result over here. So it is an object that has 3 different objects: additional user info, so we can see that this is our new user. We can get email, given name, different IDs, we can get picture if our email is verified. So this data comes from Google. And you can see provider ID is set to Google. Then we have credential, different access tokens, and then we have user object. So this user object represents currently signed in user. It is general, and from here we can understand whether our user logged in or not. We will talk about this user object in details in upcoming videos. So now what we can do, we can actually go back to Firebase. We can go to authentication. Here we can reload our authentication, let's say sign-in database, and here we can find our email with provider when it was created and created user ID. So first of all, this is not a database. This is just like small database inside this authentication library. We still need to store our users inside database. This is just to track how many users do we have signed in on inside our app or something. All right, so now let's actually modify our code slightly and let's store our user inside database. So first of all, let me put try catch block over here because we work with promises and we want to make sure that we always handle any errors. And by the way, just to notify user that we currently signed in, or if we have any errors, we can use the alert component that again comes from our suite. So if we have any error, we're gonna call alert, and then if we put dot, we can see we can have access to error, info, and success and warning messages. So let's put info message. So as a first argument, we will put error.message, and then we need to put the duration of this message, of this alert message. So let's put 4 seconds specified in milliseconds. And if we are signed in, we're gonna put alert, let's say success, and then we're gonna put signed in with again timeout of 4 seconds. All right, seems good. Now what we can do with that result? As you remember, we received an object. We received additional user info, and also we received user object. Now, by checking if additional user info is new user, so if our user that is currently being signed in is a new user, we will store it inside the database. So how we can do that? Let's navigate back to firebase.js. Here we're going to import another library, which is going to be firebase/database. To interact with the database. And similar to auth, we are going to export const database app.database, just like that. So under this database variable, we can interact with database. Let's save it. So from inside signin, we're gonna reference database, which we import from Misc Firebase. Then we're gonna put dot. Here we need to specify reference, which is basically path in our database under which we will store our data. So we're gonna store our user information under /profiles/user ID. So let's open string interpolation, and as user ID, we're gonna reference user dot. We can have email, display name, delete, and a lot of other things related to this user, but we are interested in user ID. So this user ID is going to be the same as this user ID inside authentication library. So it is going to be like we create a new user, it has been added to authentication, the user ID is automatically generated, and then we will use this user ID to store the user inside the database. All right, so now when we have the reference, we can put another dot, and from here we need to call set method. And as you can see from description, it writes data to this database location. So if I call it, here we will store an object because we have a JSON based database. So our object is going to look like this. We will have name, and name is going to be user.displayName. Then we will also have created at, which will say when the account has been created. So to put, let's say, proper timestamp to our database, we again need to use some static, let's say, property that comes from Firebase library. So we're gonna put firebase.database.serverValue.timestamp, and it will put sanitized timestamp to our database. All right, so this .set also returns a promise. So whenever we do anything with database or whatever we interact with anything, most likely we are going to interact with promises. So that's why we need to await it. And everything will be catched by this catch block and user will be notified. All right, let's save all of that because it seems like really a lot. Now let's click on continue with Google. Let's select my email and now I'm signed in. But it is actually really strange. That's probably because I have this account already added here. Maybe let me delete this account. And now let's try one more time because we need to receive an error. All right. So we click on continue with Google, then we're gonna select our account again, and now we have permission denied, and we have this not info. Let's put .error message, but the thing is that we have permission denied, and this is because if we open our database, all right, let's go and click create database, then we go to rules, and here we created the locked database by default. So whatever we try to do with the database, we will have this permission denied because as you can see, we have read and write permission set to false for all of our database. So to avoid that, what we can do here, right before we set these rules, we're gonna say that for profiles, and we need to define, let's say, a schema for our security rules. And it is not that standard way to define something with security, but it just takes time to get accustomed. Trust me, it is very easy to work with. So we have our profiles path. We just need to follow the path. So we store our data under profiles/user ID. So we're gonna put it as an object. So we have profiles, then we're gonna need to put a key, and because it is going to be something dynamic that will change, we're gonna put a $, and then we can put something like user ID. This is just to reference it inside nested object. Let me explain what I mean. So under this path, we're gonna open again another object, and inside we're gonna put another key, which is going to be .read and .write, exactly the same as we have over here. So for .read, what we are going to do, we're gonna reference if this user ID that we receive from here, now it goes as a variable. We can reference it inside this scope, let's say, that I just highlighted. So if user ID, which is that one, equals auth, and auth over here in this, let's say, context of rules is a global variable that we can access. So we can read data from profiles/user ID only when user ID that we could try to access equals auth.user ID. So it means actually only the owner of this document, only the actual user, can read its own data. Any other person, any other user will get access denied. All right, that's how we define rules for .read. So let's copy it and we will apply the same for .write. So what is going to happen here? How it will understand that we are signed in? Well, let's get back to the code. When we call this sign in with pop-up, now our user is signed in internally to Firebase services. So when we try to access database, afterwards, Firebase will pick it up and this user ID will be known to the database, and it is going to be this auth.user ID, and then we will check it against the path that we write to. Now let's click on publish. Okay, rules published. Now let's get back to the database, and actually let's copy these rules and let's paste them to database rules.json. So they are always there, all right? Then go back to authentication. Let's delete this user and let's start over. So I'm gonna click on continue with Google. I'm gonna select my account, and now I don't have any error. Now I'm signed in. So now if I navigate back to database, I can see that I have data. I have profiles, and then I have user ID, exactly the same as we have here. So this is how it works with Firebase, all right? So if we expand it, we can see we have our name, which is Chilux16, which is my name on Google account, and then we have created ad, which is milliseconds stored internally by Firebase. All right, so now we created the user and we managed our sign-in page. Congrats. I guess it wasn't too complicated for you because there are lots of things to cover here. Sign-in flow, then this database, then security rules, and everything goes at once. I know that's hard, but trust me, just let it go. After 1 hour or maybe 1 day, when you will take a look on all of that one more time, it will not be that complicated. All right, so let's commit our changes and finish this video. So we're gonna put git add everything, and then we're gonna commit something like edit sign in page and sign in with Facebook/Google. All right, perfect. In the next video, we will continue our talk with authentication and we will start our user management. See you there.